Hey everyone, and welcome. So, have you ever made a deal, maybe on a handshake, maybe on a super formal document, and then the other person just doesn't do what they said they would? It's incredibly frustrating, right? Well, it turns out the law has a whole playbook for that exact situation. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on what actually happens when a promise, a contract, is broken. Let's get into it. I mean, really, think about it. Someone says they'll deliver a product or perform a service or pay you by Friday, and then nothing. It feels personal, for sure, but in the eyes of the law, it's a specific kind of problem with a clear set of solutions. So, when that deal goes south, what can you actually do? Let's break it down. Okay, first things first, before we can even talk about the fixes, we've got to be super clear on what the problem is. In the legal world, we're not just talking about a broken promise, we're talking about a breach. At its heart, a breach of contract is really simple. It's just when someone fails to do what they agreed to do. But, and this is where it gets interesting, that failure doesn't always happen on the big day. It can actually go down in a couple of different ways. So you've got two main ways this can go down. First, there's what's called an anticipatory breach. This is when you get a heads up, but it's bad news. The other party tells you before the deadline, yeah, I'm not going to be able to do that. They might say it, or they might just do something that makes it impossible, like, selling the one-of-a-kind car they promised you to somebody else. Then you have the one we all think of, the actual breach. This is the classic no-show. The due date arrives, and they just fail to deliver on their promise. All right, so a promise has been broken. Now what? This is where we shift from identifying the problem to finding the solution. And the law provides something we can think of as a legal toolbox, and it's full of different ways to handle a breach. These tools are called remedies. And what's really important to get here is that the goal isn't just about punishment. Contract law is really about making things right. It's about giving the person who was wronged a set of tools to, as best as possible, put them back in the position they would have been in if the contract had never been broken in the first place. And here they are, the 5 main tools in that legal toolbox. You can think of this as our roadmap. We've got damages, rescission, specific performance, injunction, and a fancy one called quantum merit. We're going to look at each one, and we'll start with the most common and often the most powerful tool of them all, damages. Now, when most people hear the word lawsuit, this is probably what comes to mind. It's all about getting paid for the harm that was done. And look, it's the most popular tool for a reason, because a lot of the time, money is the most practical way to fix the problem. So when lawyers talk about damages, they're just talking about money. It's the court telling the person who broke the promise that they need to pay up. But it's not like you can just ask for $1 million for anything. The law is actually really specific about what kind of financial losses you can be compensated for. You've basically got 4 main flavors. First, ordinary damages. This is the obvious stuff. If you paid for a product, never got it, getting your money back, that's ordinary damage. Then we get more specific with special damages. These cover losses that happened because of unique circumstances that, and this is key, you told the other person about up front. We'll dig into that in a second. Third, and these are pretty rare, are vindictive damages. These aren't about making you whole. They're about punishing the other guy, and they're saved for very specific situations. And finally, nominal damages. Let's say someone breaks a contract, but you don't actually lose any money. The court might award you a single dollar, basically just to say you were right and they were wrong. This quote right here, it's the absolute core of how damages work. It comes from a super famous Old English case, Hadley versus Baxendale, and it set up a huge rule that we still use today. It basically says you're on the hook for 2 things: the normal, predictable losses from a breach, or those special losses that you were specifically told about ahead of time. And this is that famous case in a nutshell. So picture this, a mill owner's main crankshaft breaks, shutting down his whole factory. He sends it off with a carrier to get fixed, but he doesn't mention that his entire business is at a standstill. The carrier is late bringing it back. The court decided that the carrier was only responsible for the normal delay cost, not the massive profits the mill lost, because they had no idea. If the owner had said, listen, my entire mill is shut down until I get this back, then the carrier would have been on the hook for everything. And that right there is the crucial difference between ordinary and special damages. It's all about what they knew. But what happens when money just can't fix it? I mean, what if you had a contract to buy a one-of-a-kind piece of art, and the seller just changes their mind? No amount of money is going to replace that specific painting. For situations like these, our legal toolbox has some other, more specialized tools. So the next tool is called rescission, and you can think of it as a big reset button. If you're the wronged party, you can just decide to treat the entire contract as canceled. You just want out. You're now free from your side of the bargain, so you don't have to pay for anything,
and you can still go after them for any losses you suffered because of the whole mess. Now, this one is really powerful. It's called a suit for specific performance. This is where the court doesn't just give you money, it actually orders the other person to do the exact thing they promised to do. Now, a court usually won't force someone to, say, perform a personal service, but when the subject of the contract is totally unique, a specific plot of land, a rare collectible, where money just isn't a good enough substitute, a court can step in and say, nope, you made a promise, you have to keep it.
And next up, we have the injunction. It's kind of the opposite of specific performance. If specific performance is the court saying, you must do this, an injunction is the court saying, you must not do that. It's a legal stop sign. The classic example is a movie star who signs an exclusive contract with one studio. If she then tries to make a movie with a rival studio, the first one can get an injunction to stop her, because the damage to their project is unique and can't just be fixed with cash.
And finally, we have quantum merit. It sounds complicated, but it's just Latin for as much as is earned. Think of it as the ultimate fairness rule. It basically says that if you've already done some of the work before a contract gets broken or canceled, you deserve to be paid for the reasonable value of the work you've already done. It prevents the other party from getting the benefit of your labor for free just because the full deal fell through. Phew. All right, so we've gone through the two main ways a contract can be broken and the 5 key tools in the legal toolbox for fixing it, from getting paid money to getting a court to step in directly. So, what's the big picture takeaway from all of this?
If there's one thing to remember, it's this. In the eyes of the law, promises have real weight. There's a clear, structured system in place to make things right when they're broken. And at the end of the day, it's not really about punishing someone. It's about restoring balance and making sure the person who was wronged is made whole again.
And that kind of leaves us with one final thought. Now that you know all the tools that are available to fix a broken contract, how does that change the way you think about making one in the first place? How can you make your own agreements so clear from the start that you never even have to reach for this toolbox? Something to think about. Thanks so much for watching.